first off, I'm going to introduce you to Ollie Morgan, who's a mastering engineer at Abbey Road Studios. And Ollie, you're not just a mastering engineer in the sense that we always think of two-track mastering. So you're a STEM mastering expert. So
That's
first
right.
of all, but let's just go back a little bit and say, how come you're working at Abbey Road, and where did it start off at the beginning with you and your journey into music? Because I think that's always interesting to know a little bit about, behind the scenes.
Yeah, sure. My first job out of uni was I was very lucky. So I went to university and studied a kind of generic production course. And then during my third year of that, I was an intern at a place called Fluid Mastering. And while I was there, I kind of started exploring STEM mastering or kind of a way to spend more time with a song than maybe stereo mastering allows you to. And through that, yeah, I experimented with STEM mastering, got a bit of that going, and then a few years down the line, I find myself sat in this room.
So, yeah, so I mean, I know when I come to Abbey Road, and I just come there as a sort of visitor / meetings, and I'm always, blown away by just the atmosphere, the presence of who's been there, who's there, the team of people that work there. What is it like for you going in every day? Is that sort of excitement worn off? Is it a bit nonchalant now about it, or how do you feel?
It's still, if you think about it, if you take the time to think about it, it's still incredible. I on my first day, I filmed myself walking over the crossing to send to the family. Things like that, don't really wear off when you're walking through the corridors. You've got these amazing photos of incredible people that have used the studios in the time it's been here, and that doesn't wear off. You run down to the canteen to grab a sandwich and a coffee, and you see these amazing faces of people that have walked in those corridors, not too long before you. And yeah, it definitely keeps you grounded, definitely. And makes you want to up your game, to match these amazing people that have been there before you.
Well, actually, we've also got Lucy Launder, who's the head of mastering, with us. Lucy, we just maybe just for some of the people that we've got on the online, do master with us, either through us from India or directly to yourself. So some of them will be familiar with you. But can you give us maybe a quick overview, Lucy, of the department? So the mastering department, how many engineers you've got and what areas it covers?
Thanks, Andrew. That's going to test me this morning.
You weren't ready for that.
But our team of mastering engineers, so we've got an incredible sort of vast selection of 8 mastering engineers, all of whom do the normal stereo mastering and cut vinyl. We also do have 2 really great guys who are classically trained, and they work on a lot of sound tracks, but they do pop and rock as well. So what I like about my department is that it is very varied, and we can offer pretty much whatever anyone wants, and that really was a kind of the origin of getting Ollie on board as part of the newest member of our team. It's quite interesting how Ollie sort of came here. Really, he sort of pigeonholed me at a Christmas do. And I do remember talking to him, but I'd had a couple of glasses of wine, and he proposed this wonderful STEM mastering process, which I must confess to not remembering much about the next day. But then he was very persistent, got hold of me again. We sat down, had a chat. I became very excited about offering something new, something different from what we are already offering, obviously. And and Ollie is now with us and doing really well. And yeah, I can't.
No, that's a great, and that's a story for everyone to say. Keep pushing. Don't let up. If you've got a great idea, just yeah. But so that's what you do at parties. That's very, very good. But interestingly, we had people asking us, "Oh, do you do stem mastering?" And some people say, "Oh, stem mastering is for people who haven't got their mix right." But I'm learning, actually, having been chatting to Ollie over the last week or so, that it's actually just another level. So thanks, Lucy, for that introduction. Let's move on to what about the stem mastering.
Yeah, sure.
One question that pops up a lot, and we've got quite a few questions today. And as I said, if anybody wants to ask some more questions in the Q&A, then that's great. If any of you that have sent questions in that are actually online with us today, then I may drag you on to asking question, but let's in person. What is the difference between 2-track mastering, which is pretty much everything that we've done? We've done some 5.1. We did a 5.1 whole film soundtrack mastering for A.R. Rahman for a documentary film that he did, and but didn't really get too involved with the process of that. But if looking at the stem mastering, 2-track and stem mastering, just talk us through. We'll come to the demo shortly, but let's just talk a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose on the surface level, there isn't a big difference between stereo and stem in that you're very much using the same mindset. That's the biggest, for me anyway. That's the biggest thing. Being a mastering engineer is the kind of changes you're making and the way that you're listening is the same whether I'm doing stereo or working from stems. The difference with the stems is that if I hear something that I want to correct, then I potentially, for the right song, the right track, I potentially have more options and more ways that I can go about improving that song and finding the best for it.
Because interestingly, what tends to happen, not a great deal, but sometimes people will send the mix to me and say, could you ask the engineer at Abbey Road to see what he thinks, if anything could be amended? Now, that takes time, and then we go back, and sometimes even when the mastering is done on the 2-track, by doing some frequency changes and things, it elevates other areas which are quite difficult to balance, and sometimes they'll go back and remix the track to allow for that. Obviously, with stem mastering, you've got that at hand to a degree, which is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. A good example is if you've got a bright vocal and a dull drum track, then if you've got the stereo mix and you're going to treat that vocal to find the best for that, your dull drums may then become extra dull and too dull, so mastering is always about finding a balance, and it's always a balancing act between getting the biggest improvement for the least damage. That's always what you're trying to do. So with the stems, if you take it very basic and you just have an instrumental stem and a vocal stem, even that, you can bring down some of the highs on the vocal, bring up some of the highs on the instrumental, and then suddenly you have no compromises. You've only managed to benefit that song.
So a lot of people have also asked what sort of how should they arrive to you, what the stems? You've just said that even just having backing track, which in India we refer to as the IT, I guess the international track, so you can put different vocals on it. Yeah. So even having a backing track and the vocals separately, then so basically at 0 it's the mix, and you don't really touch that unless you need to get in there and manipulate that, which we can see in a bit. So what is the sort of, the minimum, I suppose, is backing track and vocal. What would be an ideal sort of, if people are saying, okay, well, I want to send something in, what would be the best sort of stem layout?
It depends very much on the song and the style, definitely. I mean, I often, not always, but I often get a reference mix, just to, even as someone's working on it, just to hear what the song is like, and what makes up the song. But in its basic sense, drums, guitars, strings, pianos, synths, basses. And then if you've got, it's always useful to separate. So sometimes it's very nice to have lead vocals and BVs, backing vocals, as two separate stems. It's also nice then, say you've got a guitar solo, something that takes the lead for a bit. It's nice to have that separate, so that if you make any level changes on the vocals or the main guitar, that you can then, you make sure the solo doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
I've lost my video. Oh, there we go. Am I back?
Yes, you're back. You're back.
There we go.
Yeah. So I would say think there must be a bit of a temptation when you have all these stems to do things that way. What does your sort of musical mind? Would you suggest to someone, or is on the mix that maybe I can bring this down, or would you just do your master based on the mix they've sent you, and then if they say anything, if they want to tweak or something, then you can do that? But
I always base what I'm doing off the reference, off the mix, the same that I would for stereo. I'm always being back with the mix.
Okay, so they've got to send you a stereo mix is important.
That's
stereo mix.
But they and in terms of preparation as well, all of their prep needs to be the same whether they're going for stereo or stem. It's not you don't do less mix work because you're going to get it stem mastered, because that defeats the point, and then I have more stuff to fix, and then we don't get a better result.
So it shouldn't be used as a way of getting someone else to fix issues. You really should get the best mix you can get at the beginning.
Exactly.
That
that's
mix
the
is
key.
So it's the same, absolute same process as if you were doing it for 2-track, but you can get in a deeper way.
That's the really good phrase. Get the best that you can get, and if you deliver the best thing that you can get in your room and your space and your ears and whatever, then anything that I'm doing is just a benefit. I'm not having to make up. I'm not having to make up any ground that maybe hasn't been got. Because
we always feel that when we do our mix, it's the best we can get, and that's it. And then when we give it to mastering, and I've had that experience myself with my own work, there's just another 10-15% of magic. I call it fairy dust. It's something that we can't hear, but sonically, the mastering engineers capture that, and that's something. I guess it's another set of ears, but it's very exciting. I've got just a question from Suresh here. He says, "How do you stereo image in stem mastering?"
That's a really, really good question. In lots of ways, there are more options for your stereo image, because I've done things like widen your guitars for your choruses and then bring them narrower for your verses, for example, to get a bit more movement going in a song. That's a good example. Whereas if I'm doing that stereo mastering, then I have to widen the whole lot and then bring the whole lot back in, which is fine, and it's sometimes that also works. But being able to do it on a stem level is great. It just means that you have a bit more flexibility in terms of shaping the song and shaping the sound of the song. So if I hear something that I think, say with a stereo mix, I hear something and I'm like, if I could do that, then I could really push this. I could push what they're hearing for everyone else. And then with the stems, then more often than not I can, which is really, really good.
Yeah, it's quite exciting. I'm excited already about it, actually, for the next thing to have that option. I'm just going to look at a couple of other questions. There's a question from Saloni, who says that while software is no substitute for a skilled engineer, so this is really about, because a lot of people master their own tracks, but I always say this, Bob Katz says that if you mastering your own track is like cutting your own hair, which is
I love that. Absolutely love that.
So some people can cut their hair, actually, but, or think they can. So it says, while software is no substitute for a skilled engineer like yourself, what do you think of plugins like Isotope's Ozone and their AI mastering assistants? I guess you know, my answer would be get Ollie to master it at Abbey Road. But if you cannot afford that at whatever stage you're at, then what's your thoughts on things
it's
like
always that? Everything like that. And you can also talk about things like Lander in the same thing, where anything like that is everything has a place for the right purpose, you know. And if you just want to demo something, or you want to send a reference to someone, or, you know, so it's something where you're not sure if you're going to go for this song, you're not sure where you are with it, then it's a useful tool. It's a useful tool for making your reference sound a bit more like a record.
Yeah.
But then if you want someone to objectively listen to it and maybe get back to you and say, you know, the AI is never going to get back to you and say, if you just did this one thing, then you know, your track will be 10 times better. But if you're using it and you're happy with it, then who am I to tell you that you're wrong? You know?
No, that's good. There's another question from Viero. I hope that's the right pronunciation. How do you deal with what's done in the stereo bus? Many mixers use plugins on the stereo bus, and it affects the tracks differently if applied to the whole mix or to each stem. So when you put all stems together, it would sound different.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really interesting one, in that if I get a reference mix and a stem thing, and I can't recreate that compression, and anything that I do with the stems isn't going to better what that mix already sounds like, then I'll use the stereo mix. I'll go from that because they've done something, they've achieved something with that bus compression, which I'm not getting. And if that's the case, that's totally fine. You know, we've tried it. We've seen if there's a benefit from going from stems. If there's not, then I'm not going to do it anyway, because that defeats the point. That's not what we're going for. We're going for the best situation for a particular song at a particular time.
Yeah.
Another good one for that is sometimes I'll ask for kick drums and snare drums to come to me separately from the rest of the kit, but only in situations where there isn't a massive amount of, you know, bus compression on drum kits. But again, it can go the other way. Sometimes I'll ask for separate stems, kicks and snares, and just the act of having to send me those so that the bus compression isn't hitting so hard actually brings all the transients back out again, which the mixer has lost because they've listened to the song a million times, you know, and I'm coming with fresh ears and like, oh, this would be great if we just had a bit more punch from those kicks and snares. Yeah. So it goes both ways is the answer to that question.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's whatever works. That's always the bottom line. Whatever works, you know, whichever sounds the best, we go from that. You know.
Well, Brooke also asked something. He says, "Do you prefer stereo bus compression when dealing with individual stems or mono instances on a stereo stem? There seems to be an argument for both in terms of how the compression is triggered, or is that material dependent?"
Good question. That's talking about. I think what Brooke is talking about is kind of linked and unlinked stereo compression. That's a really good question. And I usually work linked, but also not in cases. My default is to work linked because it's personal preference. I find that if I work too much unlinked, then you can find that the image moves. If you have something particularly dynamic on one side, then your image moves to the left or the right, depending on what's going on. So if it's something like that, then links just means that your middle stuff stays in the middle, you know, which is handy. But then again, on the other hand, if I've got something extremely dynamic on one side, which means that then my whole track is pumping just because of that, then yeah, I'll go unlinked.
So it's material dependent, I guess, really.
It's 100%. Everything is 100% material dependent.
Great.
I use the Fab Filter limiter a lot, and that has kind of a bit like a feedback control, so you can kind of feed how much is linked and how much is unlinked, and that's really useful because you can kind of get the benefits of unlinked while things are still linked. So you can find that sweet spot.
Yeah. So there's this is a question that quite a few people have answered, and Ashwin has mentioned in the Q&A. It tends people say, oh, we're getting our track for Spotify or for YouTube or for Netflix or whatever, different streaming platforms. And Ashwin is saying -8 RMS or -14 LUFS for someone who is planning to release music on only streaming services. What's your...
Yeah.
Does it vary? I mean, I'm a bit of a layman when it comes to that, but does it vary the level?
That's a good question. -8 RMS is -14 LUFS is actually a lot quieter than -8 RMS, just because of the EQ curves which feed the way of analyzing the audio. I find that -14 is too dynamic for what sounds like a record. I find that you then end up with a song that is too spiky. So personally, I aim for just a bit shy of -14, so that you still have the benefits of the normalization that's going on with streaming, without ending up with a final record that sounds like the mix, too much like a mix.
So that kind of also leads into Siddharth saying, what would you prefer in today's race of loudness, the loudness wars, which actually in India, it went crazy. And a lot of the mix engineers like Shantanu and Deepak and all these different guys there, they've been really part of making sure the mixes are not just a wall of sound, but it tends to be a bit like that. And so what would you say when it comes to the dynamics over loudness to preserve the vibe, or vice versa?
Yeah, I'm always with dynamics, always, within reason. So back to the last question, I'm not going to go crazy with dynamics, because there is a point where something is too dynamic. There is a point where it's just spiky. But in terms of kind of what we have been listening to before streaming normalization and everything like that, that was way too loud, definitely way too loud, so being able to go 3 to 4 to 5 dB quieter now is, I think, helps the song along massively.
You're preserving the vibe. You're preserving the vibe, which is really important.
But that said, if someone comes with a punky rock song that they want slammed because they want that vibe, then go for it. If you want the sound of that, as long as if someone's making the decision to have a loud master because they want the sound of the loud master, fine. I don't have any problem with that. If they want a loud master because everyone else has loud masters and they think it's best, that's when I have a problem.
I think one of the big issues, certainly when there was compilations and things like that, where there'd be one track at a certain level and then the next one would come in, it'd be quieter.
Yeah.
Before normalization and things sort of come into practice.
Yeah, and lots of, I know that Spotify does track normalization and album normalization, so they'll have different, so whether your song appears on a playlist, it'll be treated differently to if someone presses play on track 1 of your album and listens all the way through.
That's interesting.
Which is amazing for us. It's great for us, because something that some mastering engineers were worried about initially is that do you know how kind of the shape of an album, you might have a few quiet songs on there, you might have a few things on there that are quiet, or a few things that are very loud, because you want to create movement as you listen to an album. The fact that we can preserve those things as well now is amazing.
That's great.
It's really good.
Well, let's have a look at the session of the track that we're going to use as a demo. This is a track called Karuppi by Santhosh Narayanan, who's everyone will know, or those in India will know, as a very popular South Indian composer and artist. And this is a track from a film about a dog. And it's a beautiful film. And maybe I'll try and share the link of the actual video for the song.
So I can see straight away that we're clipping down here. So I can also see that all of these particularly loud things, particularly the drums here, I can see that we're not actually clipping within the stems, we're just clipping the combination of them all. So I can just bring them down by a bit until we're not clipping anything, which is great. So yeah, so as long as people ask me a lot what level they should supply stems at, so the important thing is that the relative levels stay the same as you bounce your stems out. Otherwise, I'll load them up, I'll load them here, and the mix will be entirely different.
So that's crucial that what you get is exactly what
yeah.
they've got from their studio. That's so
exactly, important. Yeah, that's it. That is the ultimate crucial thing.
So also always test them back, lay your stems back into your DAW and make sure that you're happy with that before you send them in.
Exactly. In terms of like average level, in terms of average level of everything, that doesn't matter so much. As long as your stems aren't clipping individually, I can always compensate for that, like I've done here by just turning.
So what are any issues that you found with this track?
Yeah, so you brought up the fact that the drum stem is all in one, which, not an issue. But if I listen to this and the bass line, because this seems like a crucial part of the song to me. That's kind of where all of the groove of the song is coming from.
Yeah.
So I would look to get them to gel a bit more, to kind of have them feeling like a block of groove rather than it. They seem a little bit disjointed at the moment. So that's something that I would go into. That's probably what my starting point would be on a song like this. So should we dive into that and see?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
So I'm trying not to talk while playing. So something that I find a lot is that bass instruments sometimes people leave quite dynamic, such as this one. So I try and get the kind of low lying sound. I'll just give me a second.
This is live. It just proves it's live.
Tweaks, yeah. Right then. Yeah, so sometimes I find that basic bass can be quite dynamic. So I like to try and find a way to bring up kind of the low-lying bass information while keeping the punch the same. So a good little trick for that is use a compressor. My kind of go-to compression is the R compressor for things like this. Use something with quite a long attack, so your kind of main transients still get through. So So that's how
Actually, Santhosh has just joined us. So Santhosh, we're just destroying your track. No, we're not destroying it. We're breaking it down. So great to have you on board, and thanks for sharing.
So yeah, I'll use a fairly long attack and a kind of release that matches the tempo and the way it's played. And I'll just try and bring down a few of those peaks. Just trying to get anything not to work too quickly, because bass frequencies are slow. So you don't want, if you try and start getting compressor to move too quickly with lower frequencies, you end up getting either clipping, or you lose transients, or you actually lose some bottom end as well. So I'll do something, obviously I'm going quickly, but I'll do something like that. And then to make up whatever gain I've lost, I'll add a bit back up so that my peak level is the same, but rather than bringing down peaks, I've brought up the space in between, if that makes sense. Which is useful for, sorry, I'm trying to talk, which is useful for if you combine then, if you combine back with rhythmic elements, it gives you maybe a more solid bed underneath the track, which I find helps with things kind of getting a groove to work better in a song. Quite a lot of kind of low information in these in the drum stem, but potentially having the kicks out separately might be useful in something like this, because I could bring out more of the kind of upper range of the kick drum, which might help get again a little bit more kind of impact from it. So yeah, I'm kind of looking for more of that 100-y kind of area, and maybe by doing that I would then compensate by bringing down a bit less in the subs there.
So by having those separates, that's going to really give you more
potentially, yeah. I mean, without talking to the mixer, it depends if it depends, like we said before, if that starts to mess up any compression that's going on there, then it's best not to, for me to do it like this. But if the option's there, it's great.
Yeah, so once you've done your bass and your drums, where do you go from there usually?
From there, I'll start building the track up. So the important thing when you've got multiple stems like this is making sure to keep an ear out for where everything sits in relation to the whole song, because it can get easy to kind of distract yourself with, like, how does this sound? But what you should really be listening for is how the kick, the rhythm, the bass, and the orchestra fits into the song as a whole. That's what's really important, is making sure that all the changes you're making are to better the whole song, not just each individual stem, because no one's listening to each individual stem. They're listening to the song.
That can be an issue, can't it? That if you deal with something that sounds great, but actually where does it sit in the track? And that is that is important too.
I do a lot of, for example, I will, maybe I'll get, the kind of backing sitting how I want it, and then maybe I'll click around a little bit, and I will, get a bit of what does the rhythmic elements of the vocal sound like. So let's take this rap vocal. What is the rhythmic elements of the rap vocal? How does that sit with the rhythm? And it makes me wonder if maybe that rap could be a bit more dynamic, so that it's kind of we're getting some impact from it through the rhythm, and it forms more part of the rhythm section. So I'll do things like that a bit, and how does this chorus sound with the orchestra? So I'll do a lot of clicking around like that, and listening to different combinations, and just working my way through the song and working out what my kind of families of things are. What's providing rhythm, what's providing pitch, what's providing bottom end. I'll try and work my way through that, and then make sure that each of those elements are working together best they can.
You've been doing stuff in the box there. What about, can we have a little look at your what's in front of you? Can we and what does what, and or what you may use? This is
I may have to stop sharing my screen for people to see. I don't know.
Yeah, I can stop the screen for a moment.
There we go. Cool. So first things first, this is all my routing, which is genius. I can put in and out any insert that I have on my desk here. And it's incredible. So, I can use the transformers separately from any other bit of gear, TG, or compression or whatever, so that's, that's a pretty big game changer. I can just use the bits that are going to better the track, which is incredible. In terms of individual bits of gear, EMI EQ, which is really nice, original TG EQ. Limiter as well, that's got a really nice mod done on it by Ian in the technical department, who has kind of changed the level of what goes into it so that it's a bit more appropriate for the stuff we're working on now. What else have I got? Massive passive, classic, another classic EQ, compression, EQ. And then over here, actually, I've got some kind of digital bits. So I use this limiter. There was a question about limiting.
There was a question about limiting, actually. I'm not sure whether Enrico is with us or not. Let me just see. I'm not quite. No, I don't think he is. But so what Enrico had says was, during mastering, what's your approach on gain until the final soft clip and or limiting stage? I don't know what that means, but do you tend to gain small increments on each piece of the chain, or do you gain volume out of the specific inserts in the chain?
Let me share my screen.
And if mastering with a hybrid setup, do you prefer to add gain within the analog insert? So you've obviously got a hybrid setup there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let me share this screen again. So this is a really good question. So I won't take, if I can, I'll never take more than 2 or 3 dB off for any single stage. So what that means is, these all my stems, they all end up in my stem master bus here. This is my analog chain, so I'm using a loop back in Pro Tools for that. So this is where the audio hits my chain. So what I'll do is I'll apply a little bit of digital limiting, usually from FabFilter. And I'll do it on a 1-to-1 ratio, so it's not actually changing the level of the track, it's just applying compression. So I will, let's use again the song as an example. So I'm cutting off maybe a couple of dB in places of level here. If I see that something is hitting my limiter particularly hard at this stage, I'll then go back and I'll think, okay, so there's some dynamic drums there. So that actually isn't the case in this song, but say it was. I would then go back a step and try and take out some of that dynamics here instead. As you can see, I have to push it quite hard in order to get to that point in this mix because the drums are well balanced. But so a way to put that maybe more simply is that I will try and find what part of a mix is causing me to have to get more gain reduction than I might want. And then I look to treat that, which again is a great thing about having the stems, is that I can treat more dynamic elements in a mix independently, which then means that I don't have to cane the whole mix in order to get my level up. So I'll potentially do a little bit on the stems, a little bit on my stereo send to the desk, a little bit with the transformers on the desk, and a bit of compression maybe in the desk, a little bit on my digi rack, and then my final limiting in Sadie. So any song I can have I'll have between the minimum of 2 stages, a maximum of, I don't know, 5 or 6 stages of reduction, depending on how much gain I want to get.
So there's Santhosh has just asked a question, and quite a few questions coming in, but as it's Santosh's track, he can go first. Actually, I think we may have discussed this earlier, but Spotify and other major services still allow LUFS to be bypassed. How would you approach a master at this stage? Only YouTube enforces LUFS-based volume reduction.
Yeah, that again is, we were talking about levels before. That again is a reason why I very rarely go all the way to -14, because if you do that, anyone who's turned off that, we're still a bit competitive in that sense. So if someone's got their normalization turned off, then your track would then be potentially 7-8 dB potentially quieter than other songs on a playlist. I think lots of them now are starting to have the normalization option on by default rather than off, so you don't have to find it to turn it on. You just have to find it to turn it off if you want to. I don't know why you would, because all of these services are using normalization as a listening experience. They're not doing it because they care about the loudness wars. They do it because they don't want their customers to have to get their phone out all the time to adjust the level. That's the reason they're doing it. It's not some moral high ground about loudness. It's user experience.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Which I suppose not every user is a hi-fi buff or the artist, I suppose, but still it's important to know how we're going to prepare it for our audience. There's just a couple of other questions. Ashwin says, should we look at short-term LUFS instead of the integrated? I don't know what that means.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. As far as I understand it, I don't know the ins and outs specifically of the way that all the different streaming sites do their calculations. But what I tend to do is use the short-term. Well, I actually use a sliding 10 seconds rule, which isn't quite short-term. I guess it's more medium term, I suppose. If I get that to a good level, I find that then translates pretty well to all of the other streaming sites.
There's another question. Anonymous says, should you do separate masters for each streaming service? I mean, that covers that. I think we've covered that really.
Simon, I don't tend to.
Simon's Alpin has sent a question. So thank you guys and everyone for engaging with questions and things. It really makes it interactive.
Yeah, it really helps.
Simon says, using so many stereo stems, do you run into phase issues? He says he had an issue with the bass being out of phase as it was bounced from mono to stereo. Just wondered if you run into this with stereo stem bounces.
I've never run into that problem. I don't know how that would have happened with that bass.
Because in theory, you shouldn't be changing anything in that.
No, in theory, a bass, you know, we're monitoring in stereo. So even a mono track in your DAW is sending, the reason it sounds mono is because it's sending the same information to your left and your right master channel. So I don't know, that sounds like a timing error in the bounce to me. So, you know, if your mono, say your left channel gets slightly nudged forward or back, or you're right, then you might start hearing phase issues there. But in theory, I should be getting exactly what you're hearing. So yeah, I'm not sure that problem.
Another question from Siddharth, who says, how much do you rely on the digital meters for your peaks in terms of precision? That's
a good question. I rely first and foremost on my ears, and I find VU meters useful in terms of energy, so they're analog. The digital meters, things like LUFS, the reason that they're so useful is because they are analyzing digitally, and the services in which you're giving the song to are analyzing digitally. So then you're kind of using the same rules for what I'm seeing and what the streaming service will do to that song. For example, if there's a crazy bass resonance in something that sends my VU meters wild, but my LUFS meter doesn't really account for it, then I know that that's more of a sonic thing than a technical thing. So it's more about using, with all meters, you have to find a meter that you trust, and you have to use it consistently until you then understand what it means when that meter tells you something. It's all about, using meters is always about the relationship of your eyes and your ears and how they have to be telling you the same thing. Otherwise it gets very confusing.
Okay, there was another question from Nilesh. How important is clocking for someone who does mastering in the box? So
I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I've always had a hybrid system. I know that the clocking here is all very clever and out of my hands. I suppose, you know, if you're getting timing issues, I suppose the simple answer would be, if it sounds fine, it is fine. But yeah, you'd have to get someone more technically minded to tell you precisely whether it's right or not.
And you're not technically minded.
I'm not technically minded in the right direction.
Yeah. There was a few questions. I was going to have them read out live, but some of those people. Oh, Antonio, you are that wanted to ask a question live. Can I just see if I can bring you on or not? Let me see if that can happen. 1 second. That's interesting.
Do you have to take back hosting?
Oh, I might have to. Can you see the in the side, Antonio? Can you see his name there?
Oh yeah.
How
do I now
click change to panelist? Okay.
No, I can't see that, unfortunately.
Okay. Give me 1 second. 1 second, guys. Okay, I think just so we'll... Antonio, if you do have a question, sorry, you didn't actually write it down, so maybe you can put it in the Q&A and we'll read it out.
We'll do our best impression.
Yeah, Antonio has very wisely said I can do it in the Q&A section. If you don't mind, so if you have any other questions, put them in the Q&A. Me not being technical at all. So obviously that's why I'm not mastering tracks or even using Zoom properly, but still. Just while we get a few more questions lined up, maybe we just go back to the track one more time.
Yeah.
And there was something very interesting I noted in it there was an additional like rap 3, I think it was, which was kind of just the same, the vocal treated in a slightly different way.
Like a double track.
Yeah.
Should we have a listen?
Because I was thinking, we could put those together, but actually there's probably a good reason for having those separately.
Let's have a look.
எந்திரி கருப்பி அம்மா கூப்பிடுறா குளிக்க போகணும் எந்திரிடி ஏண்டி பேசல என் கூட என்னடி நடந்துச்சாங்க வலிய தாங்காம துடிச்சி.
That's a good point. I would be happy with receiving them both together in one stem or separate.
Because it sounds like the treatment and stuff's been done already, and one's quite crushed, and it gives a real dark, like a heaviness, like a brutal sort of thing to it, which is great for that track. Part.
With things like that, I always think if you're not sure and you can give me multiple stems for it, then give me multiple. And so if I take these off, all the whatever inserts I've got, if I load up my stem project and I play it and I think, great, nothing needs doing stem wise. I'm just going to focus on stereo wise out on the desk or whatever. Then I can do that. And you've given me the stems, and if I just don't touch them and play it, then it's the same as a stereo mix. So following that thought on, if you've given me rap 1 and rap 3 here, as this is like a double track, then if I don't want to touch anything relative or do any separate EQs, then I just treat them as one thing. I can either whack them in a bus or whatever and just treat them as a single thing. That's fine. Or if I don't want to, then I have the option to not treat them the same. So options are always good, basically. I don't mind having more options and then having to consolidate them myself. I would rather do that than want to get at something and not be able to.
Because I think that sometimes people do send me a mix to send over to you guys, and they may say, I'm a bit concerned about such and such, but do you think it's going to be okay? Obviously, if it's stems, it's going to it's going to avoid that sort of concern because you can deal with it.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I mean, the days of we're all piling into a very expensive studio are lesser, obviously, going to Abbey Road, but the home studios or you can do everything. You can go back and redo it if you want, but sometimes when you're in a bigger studio, to go back and tweak it. Just in terms of preparation for preparing the stems, just what's the sort of best process? Because if we've got something in Logic, for instance, which I work in Logic, and I've got 70 tracks. And I've got orchestra, I've got drums, I've got all sorts of things. It's a bit time consuming, but if you're going to do the stem mastering, and I know you've spoken a little bit before about what to do, but what would be the maximum you could get? Because I don't want suddenly everyone sending.
I find that a really hard one to answer because I don't. There's always, with every project, there's a balance and there's an ideal. Usually that's somewhere between 5 and 25 stems.
Right.
Usually that sits somewhere in there. I think if you've got something, it gets like you're saying, if you've got something that's like a full orchestra and a couple of drum kits and things like that, then you're getting if your mix is very complex, then I don't want to I don't want to be like, well, I'm not working with more than 10 stems, you know, because that defeats the point as well. So I suppose the short answer is that it's completely dependent on the project. But
so,
yeah,
but obviously
5 to 25.
Okay, that's a good idea. So 26, forget it. No,
Yeah.
we'll be
Get out.
but I mean, obviously, you've got a wide background of musical knowledge and likes of music. How do you not put? I mean, well, and you're doing this because of your musical background, of course. That's the whole thing. But where do you draw the line between, you know, putting in your own, you know, your own thoughts?
Yeah.
Where I mean, maybe, I mean, that would happen if there's been some sort of concern from the artist that they think it's not quite right, and they may point out some things. Would you go? What I'm trying to allude to, would you go further than that and say, "Look, I think we could do this," or is that out of your remit? I mean,
it depends. It entirely depends on my relationship with the mixer, producer, artist, client, whatever, label, whatever.
Yeah.
Entirely depends on that. You know, if we've worked together a few times and we start to understand each other, have a bit of a engineering sonic rapport going, then that makes my decisions easier, I suppose, because we've worked out a framework of what are things that I do and what are things that I don't, you know. So again, I'll take that project by project. The bottom line, I suppose, is that if I haven't finished working on a song if I don't love it by the time I've finished it. So if there's something that I think I can do, and it will mean that I think I've taken the song to another level, then I'll do it. And if they don't like it, they can tell me, and I can undo
put it back. Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's great, because the whole point is coming to you for that added understanding and knowledge. In terms of, I mean, obviously this is your expertise. In the time frame, I know we don't want to give away trade secrets and everything, but you know, it's. I remember actually, I think I did a TV commercial, and the director was there, and they only had a few hours to write it, to picture, and that's crazy. And then they thought you could do that for everything, and just 2 hours it takes. But when it comes to mastering, I'm not saying how long it physically takes, but in terms of a 2-track to a stem master, is there a difference in duration it would take you to? I mean, I guess it depends on how much work there is to do on it, but as a rule, because we're hoping that everything that comes to you is already mixed and will work very well. And if you need to dip in, then great. But otherwise, you know, it's going to be plain sailing. And the other thing is that, you know, you're talking about the relationship. Again, with Santhosh, we did, I think Alex Gordon did 27 tracks for a film. There were 3 languages, so it was 9 tracks. And certainly, you know, the relationship that Alex has got, and all of you guys with some of the regular clients that we have, you know what they want, and they know that they get what they want from you. And I think that relationship is important. And even when people need to have a chat, I would encourage that as well. So we probably. We've already gone past the 2 o'clock, so it's meant to be an hour. But I'll just finish these questions.
I don't mind answering questions.
If that's okay.
No, all good.
So Antonio says, do you master mostly music, or are there instances where you master for computer games and other media? If so, does stem mastering apply in audio posts for film and games?
That's a good question. I do a bit of mastering, stem mastering for TV use, so that involves, you know, different cues and things like that. So there is a use for it. It's when I do those things for TV, I can also give stems back, you know, that I always have to give stems back to them, because if the client needs stems, or they want to do a different edit or whatever, they need to be able to do that without coming back every time. So there is a use for it. It's a slightly different process. I'll be more mindful of the stems, I suppose, in that sense, because I need to make sure that they stand up.
Yeah.
Individually, I'll process. I suppose I'll do more processing. I'll be more heavy on stem processing rather than the stereo processing, because you can't ever really tell how the stereo processing will then interact on individual stems when you have to supply them. So it changes the way that I do ever so slightly, but yeah, not massive.
Okay. David says, what bit depth and sample rate are you mastering at?
24 or 32 bit, whatever I get from the client stems, and sample rate again, whatever is recorded and however it's been recorded and mixed.
Great. So Viero says, about preparing the stems for you, I see your sessions set up with all stems in stereo. Do you ask for mono tracks, i.e. bass guitar, lead vocals, bass drum, snare, or doesn't it make a difference?
More often than not, because I'm dealing with mix stems, then everything will be a stereo track by that point. You know, like vocals, for example, even though it's a mono source, there'll be stereo effects on it. So I'll need a stereo track. Same goes for, well, to be fair, kicks. Same goes for snares. Your kicks, if they end up in a drum group, then they might have a little bit of reverb on them or something. So more often than not, everything is already a stereo track. Everything has kind of worked its way to being a stereo track. I don't mind working from mono or stereo. You know, I load them up the same in Pro Tools, and they interact in the same way. So I don't mind. Okay.
An Indo who's from a great band called Advaita, who's up in Delhi. How many revisions do you allow to a project, if at all needed?
Good question.
Yeah.
I allow until the song is right.
But doesn't mean to say.
Yeah, but so I allow until the song is right. If there's a point where revisions aren't going to fix it, because if you need X amount of revisions, then you're needing those revisions because something has gone wrong wherever in the process. Yeah, you know, and so something's not working for you. I would suggest that something maybe isn't working more fundamental than whether the kick drum is a dB too loud or not. You know, so depending on so it's dependent, but there is a point where you're just going around in circles.
Ashwin is talking something, asking a question. It's more of a mixed thing, I suppose. But any tips on getting the vocal in the pocket when mastering a track with lots of instrument backing tracks?
Good question. Yeah, it's more of a mixed thing, definitely. But if I find a vocal isn't in the pocket and there's something I can do about it, then obviously the whole point of having the stems is that that is something that I can look at. That is more about compression and EQ on other things to make sure there's space for the vocal. That's more what it's about. So if there are things I can do, if I feel like a vocal is sticking out there, that's what I'll reach for.
Brilliant. Well, I think it's, I mean, I've learned a lot actually. And just to take a bit of time to understand the process and what can be done. Because as I said, you know, I've always had these comments that, well, if you need to do stem mastering, the mix isn't right. But actually, you know, we can just make it better, and which I think is really, really exciting. So just to give you a bit of background for those who aren't familiar, Bohemia Junction, which is my company, we're the official sort of mastering representative for India. So we deal with all the Indian clients. So they come to us, we help you choose the right mastering engineer, and we'll liaise directly and get your tracks mastered, which is what we've been doing for 7 years now. We also work with the orchestra in Macedonia. So we're doing 4 or 5 film scores a month, which is really exciting. And a lot of those tracks and stuff that we're actually recording with the orchestra end up being mastered at Abbey Road. So it's a great process. If there are no more questions, I would just thank everybody for, and there's a lot of you today come on, which I really appreciate. We will edit this up and get it online at some point soon. Ollie, I really want to thank you very much.
My pleasure. No, it's been good fun.
And I want to thank Lucy for letting Ollie take some time out from stem mastering to chat about it.
And thank you, Andrew, for organising it, because I think it's been really instructive and helpful, I hope, for everybody.
No, that's great. So I think if anybody needs further information, they can email me, or we can be in contact with Lucy. So we hope to see some stems coming through the inbox soon. So thanks again to everybody, and let's all stay in touch.
Brilliant.
Great.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.